This is where that live stream starts. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, and we are live. Welcome back. I'm Chris Trammell. I'm the creator, developer, and head coach of the Author Launchpad. This is day 3 of the Author Launchpad Masterclass and Workshop, how to market and monetize your expertise, your book, your expertise in 2024, and what it's going to take for you to get that out into the world, right? Like, have 2024 be different than what 2023, 2022, 21, whatever, however it could have looked. What you do in 2024 is what gives you that catapult, that trajectory into that next stage of your career as an author, as an expert. If you're a speaker, thank you for being here as well. Or maybe you're part of those corporate escapees that are like, maybe I should write a book and really establish my authority, and then I'll start consulting. Wherever you are on the spectrum, I can't thank you for joining me. It is a pleasure to serve you. Now, before I get going, as I let all of my clients, all of my followers know, the number one thing I'm going to ask you to do is to make sure that your live stream is going live. So here we are. I'm going to go first. I'm going to find so I'm in the Author Launchpad right now. Live stream is going live. So here we are. So he's talking. I'm going to put him on mute. And now I'm going to go grab those 3 little dots that are right next to it. It says Chris Trammell is live. I'm going to see where copy link. I'm going to copy that link, and I'm going to go ahead and put it over into Chris Trammell Coaching. That is part of my nurture community. That's where I go ahead and I give business strategy. I give author strategy, coaching, leadership. So I'm going to go there where it says write something, and I'm just going to post it. Boom, and paste. And I'm going to post that right now. So that's now activated, because allow the bots to work for you. I know a lot of you are like, it's 12 o'clock, I got to jump. No, 12:01, 12:02, the bots are telling people time to come over. That guy, Chris, the thing you registered for, it's starting. Let people complete what they need to complete. And then you could start your main information, your runway into your topic. You know, give people just a few moments, right, to allow them to come in. And so now it's also in Chris Trammell Coaching. And today, because I have one of my favorite people, I'm going to go ahead and just throw this onto my stream with Raffi Andonian. And I'm just going to put it right there today so that everybody could see me with Raffi Andonian and post. All right, so that is now live as well. So welcome to day 3 of the Author Launchpad. I'm Chris Trammell. I am the creator, developer, and head coach of this program. It is a pleasure to be with you and to serve you. I see I've got someone joining on Zoom. It's already our main guest for the day. So I'm going to let him in for just a second. And no, I'm not going to. Oops. Uh-oh. Good thing that did it keep it going here? It sure did. That was an error on that part. That shouldn't have happened. So let's go ahead and pick this back up over here. Technical glitch. Technical glitch. And we're back in action. That means the live stream is going to stop. So I'm going to go ahead and admit meeting is still being streamed live. Okay, good. I'm going to double check this. Don't share. I'm going to spotlight myself. Raffi, I see you coming in. Give me 1 second to get you in, Raffi. I had a little bit of technology glitch. So I'm going to make sure I'm still streaming, which I am. Okay, great. I accidentally closed out the meeting on one of my devices, but because I made my other device co-host, it kept the meeting alive. We are still live. So, Raffi, before I let you in, I want to set the stage for today because who you are and what you've done is, I know once you and I get going, we're just going to take off and we're going to connect that way because that's one thing that we are capable of. And I see I need to stop that screen right there. Okay, great. I got everything squared out of the way. Today, day 3 is about owning your expertise. And it is specifically why I am going to be having Raffi joining us today, because he illustrates exactly what it is about owning your expertise. And there's a couple things I want to put into your listening about what does that really mean when you hear people say, oh, own your expertise. Well, that's pretty broad. So I'd like to give you a couple points that I like for you to have. Now, if you've been with me this week, you know that I've had on day 1, Tim Jacobs. He is an expert in publishing. He talked about crafting that story, right? Like really creating that message that was going to make a difference for you. On day 2, yesterday, if you were here, we had Lisa Carroll, who says not only should you have that book that makes a difference for others, but then create a membership. Have your own book club. Be able to have something where people continue to come back into your ecosystem, because here we are on Facebook. Now you got to remember, this is borrowed territory. We're renting space anytime we're on someone else's ecosystem. So always have a place where they can go to be with you. And whether you're going to do that in Kajabi communities, which is what I use, maybe you use Circle, maybe you use Hive, there's something that you use. But you want to make sure, as Lisa said yesterday, you have somewhere where they get to come to you and learn from you. Because remember, you're that guide that they're looking for. You have those solutions. We are solution-centric. There's a number of people with the problems that we solve. You don't have to look for Carol, age 35, 3 kids, drives a minivan, lives in the suburbs, or Arthur, corporate escape. Like the days of looking for this specific avatar are kind of gone with how we've got the internet now. Bring your solution, bring your promise, and make sure that that is woven into your process. And that was part of what Lisa described yesterday. And then we had a guest appearance by Lee Elias, who is part hockey consultant for NHL and for collegiate teams. He was a fantastic conversation to have yesterday. So I'd also invite you to look at that, how he took his book, which is originally a thesis. And you're going to hear Raffi talk about how some of his work was also part thesis at one time. And Lee took his thesis about winning teams at the collegiate hockey level, and then parlayed that into what do winning teams look like inside of the organizational private sector settings. And now he's doing really well with that. So the purpose here is your expertise really is going to be, how do you create it out of the world? How do you take it newly and create new offerings with it? So grant me a moment to make sure that I share with you the things that I'm going to be asking Raffi about in this journey as well. And I want to share them with you. So inside of your expertise, I say there's 5 components as I look at it and as I work with people that I think really matter. The first one is your education, right? Like we're all educated, whether you've been educated through universities, sometimes we call it the School of Hard Knocks, but the School of Hard Knocks is more about number 2, experiences. So first, you've got your traditional education. My education really is circuitous. I've done everything from evolutionary biology, marine mammals, pre-veterinary medicine, animal behavior, anthropology, genetics, immunology. Like I loved science. So I learned to pull from science, and it taught me the scientific method. And inside of having that process, I have a kind of that Virgo mind that looks for things in process and method. Number 2, experiences. Your life is full of experiences. When you hear people tell you, tell your story. Yes, true. And craft a story that moves people. don't just tell a story, because when you just tell it, sometimes you're generating it, making it about you. When you craft a story, you're thinking of your audience, you're thinking of your listener. You're making sure, does this engage them? Does this keep them hooked? All right. So inside of those experiences, craft a story. Number 3, who do you enjoy working with? Like, I enjoy working with mission-driven, passionate leaders. And most of them tend to show up with a book, with an expertise, with a workshop. And they're like, Chris, how do I monetize this? How do I market this? How do I write a signature group coaching program? Well, luckily, part of my experiences was I was a curriculum writer for the Los Angeles Zoo High School, which is where I'm going to have this guy come in from in just a few minutes. So who do you enjoy working with? Create your expertise to serve those people. And I forget who it was, maybe, I don't know, cowboy proverb that says, when you can make your vacation your vocation, you're doing something right. So do it in a way that you enjoy. Number 4, who do you engage? So part of who do you enjoy working with and, enjoy doing it, now you've got to make sure it's who do you engage? Because you may think that you're serving this kind of group, but ultimately it's someone else just slightly different that really wants to work with you best. Let me give you a point. I created a program called the Author Launchpad. I thought I was going to just be serving authors, because in my head, it was to serve nonfiction authors who were published and help them launch into that next phase of their career. But because I was a little vague inside of the name, the Author Launchpad, I get a lot of people coming to me saying, Chris, can you help me write a book? And so inside of when I say, can you help me write a book? I'm like, oh, I needed to narrow this down a little bit. So who do you engage is for? And then that last piece that I say your expertise should also be looking at is what are you equipped to answer? What's your calling that your life has uniquely equipped you to answer? And we're going to dive into those 5 domains and what it allows you to create when I now get to bring on, and we've got one more guest. I'm going to let another guest in right now. Fantastic. Okay, we'll put her right there. Awesome. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I have a profound honor of bringing someone from my history. We're going to be talking about history, but bringing someone from my history to the stage. I have known this gentleman, now a full-grown man, since he was 16. And he was already on a trajectory to be engaging, to be affable, to be smart. He was the guy that was willing to talk and socialize with people. And you could see how that extroversion was going to lead into some really amazing things. He went on to the University of Penn State, where he got his underdegrees in history there. Then he went on to the University of Georgia, where he got his master's work completed there. And from that point forward, he has continued to develop himself by volunteering at Gettysburg, volunteering at other historical national parks, and now welcoming to the stage the gentleman that everybody now is referring to as the celebrity historian, Mr. Raffi Andonian. Welcome to the Author Launchpad. It's a pleasure to have you, brother.
I was a park ranger at Gettysburg, by the way.
Park ranger?
Yeah, I was park ranger at Gettysburg. If you Google my name, there is still actually a photo out there from back then that pops up with me as a park ranger, and it is me, and you'll see a couple of Civil War cannon in the background. So yeah, you'll see me in the ranger outfit. Yeah, I do a lot of volunteer work, but Gettysburg was me on staff doing 30 different programs, taking people around the battlefield.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, sometimes you can see me writing notes because for those people that are following along, Raffi even got his own page right there. Okay. So people are going to be capturing, if they're watching this now or in the replays, some of the nuggets that you give away. How many different historical sites have you, let's go with worked at or volunteered with first? Because I know you've spoken at many, but let's go with the ones where you were kind of sharpening your
Yeah, so
teeth.
early in my career, of course, I was at Gettysburg for several summers from 2004 to 2010. And that was during my time going through college and graduate school. I worked there each summer doing more and more programs. I've also worked, I did a stint at Richmond National Battlefield Park, which if you go to Richmond in Virginia, obviously, that's the former Confederate capital. But there's a series, because it was a former because it was a former capital, there's a series of Civil War related sites around it: hospital site, naval site, battlefields, forts,
Wow.
different kind of industrial site. So it was a bit major important thing. So a lot of action took place there. So those were actually all under one park. It's considered one site, but really there's a bunch of sites. So I worked there for a while, also leading programs. And then I worked at the Martin Luther King home during the school year.
Really?
In Georgia. Yep. MLK home is in Atlanta. Of course, that's in Georgia. So in the summers I was at Gettysburg, but in the school year, for a portion of my time in graduate school, I would go into Atlanta and lead tours at the Martin Luther King home, which is pretty cool. You can still go there. And then, and finally after that, I moved to New Mexico, and I worked for a couple of years in Los Alamos, where the atomic bomb was created. Of course, the movie Oppenheimer this past summer, there was actually some scenes filmed at locations that I worked, which is pretty
I,
cool.
I remember you taking pictures there, talking
That's right.
about that.
That's right. So those are the four sites that I actually worked at as a job, where I was doing various things. Now, Los Alamos is not National Park Service, although now there's a National Park Service site. Los Alamos is a place where, it was a nonprofit, a historical society that was there and is still there. And I worked for that organization doing education programs as well as doing some development type work. So those are my job stuff. And then at sites. And then as far as volunteering and doing different things, I don't even know, man, a bunch, maybe a dozen sites or so, over time, I've done some volunteer work.
Let me ask you this question as you talk about some of the most significant, I would say, locations of the birth of our country. And this, I don't want it to steer us too far, but I want to anchor it in how it's influenced you as we look at like that golden thread in Raffi's life. Gettysburg, Richmond, MLK, Los Alamos, all of those are locations where people made very important decisions about how human beings were going to be in the world. And as someone who taught about that, who was influenced by the words of Lincoln, I don't doubt that you can't recite the Gettysburg Address right now, or read, the works of MLK, or all of the geniuses that we saw in the movie Oppenheimer. How has that influenced you? That type of like standing in the shoes, standing in the shadows, standing in the spaces of, how has that influenced Raffi in his life?
Well, lots of different ways. So I agree in a decision making. I do a whole program actually on on leadership and decision making attached to historic sites. So a couple things one it does is, one, when you look at decision making outside of your own world, it highlights certain principles that you otherwise don't see when you're buried in your own jargon, industry, whatever. So that's one thing that you learn and you keep with you, the kind of principles that maybe transcend the situation that you're in. Okay. The second thing is it provides perspective. I think a lot of times when you think something is a problem in your life and you think that this is a difficulty or a challenge or it's insurmountable, I think having a perspective of there's been much bigger challenges before really helps kind of realize, what you have in front of you is not a big deal. So that's another thing that I keep with me, including through the words of some folks, absolutely, such as MLK or Lincoln or others. Yes, that's what they're talking about, is the struggles. And third, I would say another perspective it gives, having worked at a battlefield, which is a site of a site of a lot of death, is to give you perspective on time. You realize that time is something that is very finite. And because when you realize that there is not, when time is finite, like you really grapple with that, it makes you treat time differently
Mm,
because of the fact that um, it's so easy to think that time is something that is, infinite. Like you just kind of take it for granted. And I think a lot of people say that, but I don't know if they feel it. You take for granted that there's always another moment, another day, another month, maybe until you get much older. But at that point, you're through most of your life.
wow.
But I think when you're at a site at a location where a lot of young people are dying en masse, it gives
Yeah.
you a lot of perspective on time being finite and you realizing that you don't necessarily have tomorrow to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. So now is the best time.
Wow. All right, Raffi, let me reflect back to you some of the genius that you've already shared. And one, I really want to acknowledge you for your brand consistency. You always show up wearing a bow tie. And I don't know that many authors maintain that type of brand consistency. And as a celebrity, those are the things that I want to point out because people just say, "Oh, look how good looking he is." True. And you made sure that even for Chris Trammell, former high school teacher, now creating curriculums for authors, you showed up the way you want to show up. So right on for doing that. I appreciate it and I acknowledge you for maintaining that. I loved what you talk about perspective. I think the principles that we're either going to speak from the stage, that we're going to do on social, or that we're going to deliver inside of a boardroom absolutely should be grounded in universal principles that work for all. And I think, how can you not, when you stood in the shadow, the steps of Lincoln and MLK, not be influenced by principles that work for all and not just for the few?
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I would just add that, people get nervous about, let's say in my case, going on camera with the TV stuff, or people get nervous about, like you said, going on stage or whatever it is, but it's really not that big a deal if you put it in perspective. If that's your challenge, then you have a pretty good life. And I would much rather, I mean, think about the privilege that you have to have that opportunity when, again, you put in historical perspective, you realize, yeah, this is not that big a deal. I actually have a privilege as opposed to this challenge. And I think that helps you calm down a little bit if you're nervous because you kind of get outside your own, I don't know, your own bubble.
yeah,
Where you think that, oh my God, this is such a big deal. I'm going to collapse. No, you're not. You don't have 200 guns fired at you. So, no.
right. Well said. Rafi, that's really good. Sometimes I get nervous and I forget that I've stood eye to eye with a tiger that wants to kill me or an African lion that wanted to take me out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I've navigated that in my life, I'm going to be okay standing in front of 100 people that are just sitting there listening to
The
me.
other thing is, that's right. The other thing is, why are you worried about their acceptance? Who cares?
Mm,
I mean, like the thing is that, if they're fit for whatever it is that you're offering, then they'll accept it. And if they're not, that's okay. Let them go away. That's a blessing because otherwise you're wasting your time trying to arm wrestle people that are not actually a fit. And so either way, it's a win, even if they don't like it. And that's unlikely. I think we kind of get into our own head as to, people not liking the stuff, but I don't care if they don't or do. You've got to deliver your stuff. You were saying something earlier about delivering your solution. You've got to deliver your stuff. And for the right people, it resonates. For the other people, it may not.
yeah,
And that's okay. I think one of the biggest traps we fall into as authors, speakers, any kind of thing where you're promoting or selling something that you end up wanting to make everyone a prospect for whatever it is you offer. And the reality
yeah,
is they're not all prospects. And wasting your time on non-prospects in those situations is really a waste of resources. So it's okay. I'm not worried about if they accept me or not. I'm going to deliver what I'm going to deliver at a high level of execution. And the rest I don't control. You and I used to watch college football a lot, right? And
yes,
in college football, what do you control? You don't control the polls. You don't control those outcomes. What you control is the game you bring to the execution you bring to the game. That's what you control. So you try to focus on mastering that execution, and the rest you do not control, right? But the outcomes will happen if you are focusing on mastering the execution. So just focus on mastering the execution, and the rest will happen to the places that it's supposed to happen. And those that melt away, you're wasting resources if you're worried about them.
So good, Raffi. Thank you for that. And unscripted, you spoke exactly what I want to share. I normally show this earlier on my segment. I brought you in. So this is my program. I broke it into what I call the revenue roadmap. And today what we're talking about is owning your expertise. And you said exactly what it is. It's like package your content, your expertise as a leading authority without self-doubt or any lacking of clarity. It's just owning who you are. And when you own who you are, your audience will find you and you'll start to speak that message that they are intended to hear. And just like you said, the other ones will start to fall away. And really great. So I want to talk to you about a second here about expertise and process. So let's go back to Raffi's first book. What had you write that first book, and what was the process to getting it published? So for the authors that are listening or early stage, what was that?
Well, you were talking earlier about education and experience, and for me, it was a combination of both. So what later became my first book, but not knowing I was writing my first book when I was writing it, was partly because of education. One of my master's degrees at University of Georgia was in historic preservation, and so I was kind of aware of these questions about contested historic sites. I was always drawn to them, historic sites, symbols. In the early 2000s, there was a lot of controversy over the Confederate flag. That flared up again in 2015, 2016. But of course, this is around 2011-ish that I'm doing this. So 2015 hasn't happened yet. And I was interested in the Confederate flag. I used to do a program on the Confederate flag and its many uses and layers when I was at Gettysburg. So I was always drawn to these multi-layer kind of stories. Now, that's not what my thesis turned out to be on for historic preservation, but my point is these kind of contested sites and symbols and historical themes was something I was interested in. So then when it came time for me to write a thesis for my historic preservation degree, which is the education part, there was an experience component that came in, which is I was working by 2012 at Los Alamos, the birthplace of the atomic bomb I was just talking about. And around me, what was going on was the effort to try to get a national park site also at Los Alamos, in addition to the nonprofit historical society that's there.
Wow.
That effort had been going on for years preceding my time. But when I came there, it kind of hit this culmination point, and that bill to pass and make it into a national park failed in Congress. It failed in part because there was this notion of, if we create a national park to the atomic bomb site, are we glorifying the bomb, and are we glorifying, bloodshed? And so that question really got me interested in exploring, because again, there's this sort of theme of contested stories and contested histories, multiple layers and perspectives, and I was in it. I would see visitors that you love the bomb because it saved your grandfather's life, because otherwise they were going to get deployed. You hate the bomb because it killed a lot of people. You love the bomb because it ended the war. I mean, like, there's all this kind of stuff, right? All these layers. So that experience shaped the question that I asked, and then I asked, and so I figured, like, how do we approach these contested sites? How do we do that? So I used the atomic bomb site as a case study to flesh out 4 main questions on how to approach historic sites. And then I took that 4-question blueprint that I created in my thesis. Later, it became a book. And funny enough, when I put the book out, what happened in 2020? But of course, all the contested monuments and sites and all that flared up. So I was positioned, because of my work, to have a blueprint, a framework of how to approach these contested places. Now, monuments and sites and symbols are not all exactly the same thing, but they often are points of contention that are
Yes.
unpacking the same themes that we're talking about. And the important thing to me was to have those 4 questions be questions, not a predetermined answer. Because I thought there was a value to these multi-layered kind of debated places to be able to have an open-ended question that allows us to have a discussion around this framework that puts us on common terms in trying to evaluate and understand these places. And so that's how the book journey happened, man. It was from a thesis based on my education and experience in that moment that I was positioned to write a book. I adjusted it, put it out as a book in early 2020, not knowing what was going to come later in 2020. And then of course, all the monument stuff happened in 2020, and I already had the book out. And that's how I first got on TV, was because
Really?
the timing of it, the timing of having a book on contested historic sites and, all that was going on. Now it was newsy. And once it's newsy, it's easier to get on TV. One of the biggest things to get on TV is you've got to be relevant to what's going on now.
Mm.
You got to answer the questions, 3 questions. Why here? Meaning wherever you're trying to present, whatever the network, location, whatever it is. Why now? That's the timeliness question. And why me? Why am I the person? And in the why me part, a book helps in that process, right? Helps you make an expert. Now, that is not enough by itself. You got to put an effort to get on TV with the why now and the why here. But the why me is answered with a book. That helps a lot. That's a big time reason to do that. So I didn't know what was coming when I did the book. I didn't know the TV thing would take off the way that it did. Of course, I always liked public speaking. I had been doing tours like we just talked about at various places.
Yeah.
But and talking to a camera is different than public speaking, but it does give you some background in it. And so that happened though because of the book. Now it didn't happen magically. They didn't come to me. I had to go get it, but I had the tools and the to be able to do so.
Hey, Raffi, I want you to say that part again. It
Which
didn't
part?
come to me. I
No,
had to go get it.
I had to go get it. Yeah, it's not like I was just sitting there with a book and all of a sudden like the news station showed up and wanted my opinion. No, you think about it. You're one of a million people, if more than that, with a book. Okay. Now having a book is a separator from someone without a book, but then there is a bunch of people that have a book, and you're
Yeah.
hiding there. And unless you bring attention to yourself with the book to use it as a prop, and
Yes.
to use that as a prop is how now is how I got on TV. And yes, I had to go get it. Now you know this already, but I'm doing a TV seminar to show how to get on television and how to then use it in your business, specifically on the TV part. And from that experience and beyond, I have 150 TV appearances since then, and
150 now.
it became a thing. Yep, it became a
Job,
thing.
Raffi.
And so I'm doing that in late April. TVseminar.tv is where you can go and you can see the information on that. But I now teach how you go get it. Like you said, it doesn't just come to you. You have to go get it. That's the thing. You really have to go get it yourself.
A lot of knowledge that you just dropped right now. So I want to help people out because we could hear your genius and we could hear your expertise. So I just want to reflect a couple things. Your book started off as something you enjoy. It was your master's work. You were deeply engaged in this topic. So it made you an expert by engagement. Outstanding. I really like multi-layered stories. I haven't heard, I've heard you say it before, but I'm not used to hearing it on the regular. So I really appreciate that multi-layered stories because it brings context. It brings all the different perspectives. Those are the layers, right? And I think the mastery is when you could create a container that holds all the different context without them being in competition. They could actually hear one another without judgment and divisiveness, but we could actually hear the humanity in one another's rationale and reasoning. Really beautifully illustrated.
Let me add just one little quick to that.
Please.
I had a social purpose behind this, which is that I was concerned about polarization in society. So I thought I wanted to try to do something about it. And that was my way to do it. So having a mission is also valuable in this.
I asked you earlier, how has standing in the footsteps of Lincoln and MLK influence. And there it is. It's mission. It's to bring value to humanity. Yeah, really great. Thank you for interrupting to make sure that came out. And again, sometimes we don't interrupt the flow of things when we feel this is worth saying. And that's part of that confidence building that I think when you say you got to go get it, that is also part of the confidence building that we have to go and do about. So let's dive into that for just a second. How has your confidence grown? Because I knew who you were at a young teenage, and you already had a certain bit of like, I'll go for it, I'll do it. You know, that was already there. But now it's refined, it's purposeful, it's professional. But how did you also develop your confidence as a professional and purpose-driven?
Well, it's two things. It's like I would think about sports, right? You can practice, but if you're practicing poorly, practice by itself doesn't do it. You got to also study and analyze and adjust, right? And so I would say for me, you know, it has to do with three things. One is perspective, back to that, you know, hey, what I'm doing is not a big deal compared to the challenges in the past. That gives you confidence because you're like, it's not a big deal to, you know. Two, in terms of the challenge, right? That confidence for the challenge. Two is experience, right? Like the practice. But related to that and very important is because experience, you could do it for 30 years and do it wrong. If I'm shooting the basketball, right, and you have to have your elbow tucked in, and I shoot it 10,000 times, I have a lot of experience, but if my elbow is not tucked in, I'm not doing it right. It doesn't matter. I need to study myself and say, no, I need to bring my elbow in, right? Now shoot it 10,000 times. So it's not just shooting it 10,000 times, it's actually studying, analyzing, and adjusting. That's the kind of thing I mean, right? Film study, form study, technique study. And so part three is really studying the craft. I really am a fan of mastering execution. You think about in football, for example, when you run trick plays is when you're getting desperate. When you do random schemes, you can get some success, but in the long run, who wins out is Nick Saban, who masters execution. Okay, so you've got to master execution, dominate the moment. I think we get so in basketball, you know, if you dribble, pass, do footwork, and shoot really well, you're going to be incredible. Okay, so Kobe Bryant has something where he talks about, you know, the reason he was so great is because he obsessed over the basics.
Master the basics.
Do them perfectly, right? So I believe in execution. Perfection is the standard. I think sometimes we hear, you know, don't try to be perfect. Well, I think in executing those fundamentals, you should try to be perfect. That's the standard that you're constantly reaching for. And if you master your craft, your execution, then you're really going to go to places that you is unforeseen. So I guess to me, my point is the confidence. Those are the three things. Okay, it's the perspective, it's the practice, and very importantly, it's the studying so that I can go back and fix the practice that continues this cycle, right? In sports, you might call that film study. You're gonna have a coach that's gonna watch you, etc., and you're gonna make the adjustments and then practice it again in that sense, in that way.
So great, Raffi. So great.
Now you're confident because when the moment arrives, when the lights are on bright, okay, and the pressure is on, you know what to do. You know you have the confidence because your muscle memory is there, having done it so many times that it just does it without thinking. You know, athletes call that in the zone, right? When you're in the zone,
totally.
You're not thinking. Think about this. When Tom Brady drops back to pass, all right, you got 2 seconds to do something, right? Less than 2 seconds to react, usually. You think he's having to think through the playbook? He can't. You can't think through the playbook. You've mastered the playbook so far beyond memorization that you're just in the moment reacting. But that reaction is not a natural instinct. You weren't born knowing how to pass the ball. It's a programmed instinct, what I call a programmed instinct, which is that you internalize it so much that when you make the decisions, you're just making the decisions based on all the stuff you studied without even realizing it. The same way I'm using the English language right now and I'm not having to think about my words because I mastered the English language so well within the context of my vocabulary that in the context of conversation, the words just come out. I don't have to think about my next word the way I have to when I'm thinking in Spanish. I have to think about my next word in Spanish because I'm still struggling to remember the words. I don't have it so well mastered that I can just react to the moment. You follow what I'm saying? But I wasn't born knowing English. It's not instinct, but I programmed it into myself by doing obviously what we need to do to learn the language. So this is what I'm saying is that for us, if you want to get the confidence, you have to commit yourself beyond studying it, beyond even like knowing it, beyond even memorizing it, but to make it so it's just boom, natural. It comes out of you. It feels natural. Same way that the words I'm speaking right now feel natural.
Raffi, I didn't know that this bow tie turns into a reverend collar and you also start dropping it from the pulpit.
So it's just some comparisons for people to understand, right? Sports, language, whatever, reactions. And you know about instinct. I mean, you study animals, but this is not about what you're born knowing. It's about what you can program yourself to feel natural.
Raffi, thank you for that. Because it's not I really love what you talked about execution. When I was a track and field coach, I never got you to run track. I did watch you play basketball. A little suspect on that elbow.
Yeah, true. And football, remember?
And football. That's true. That's true. But when people say like, what's the special sauce? What do I got to do? What's the funnel? What's the platform? What's the automation? No, execution is the special sauce.
But
that's
in economics, go ahead. No. Finish your thought.
Well,
sorry.
I when you said that, I'm like, it is your expertise being executed over and over and over is the special sauce. The deliver, review, refine, re-engage with what you're doing and repeat it. That's the formula of special sauce of success.
That's true. And the thing is that, in economics, there's a term called barrier to entry. Okay. An easy example of that is, why don't you and I go start a plane company right now? Because Boeing is having some trouble, right?
Right.
Airbus is the main competitor to Boeing. I know there are some smaller kind of jet companies out there, but the reason we don't, partly, is difficult. The barrier to entry is you need an immense amount of capital to get it going, and you have to have a really long time horizon for it to be turned profitable. So we'd have to be funding it for so long, for immense capital.
You and I would be like Orville and Wilbur.
But what has a low barrier to entry, for example, is maybe if I wanted to start a food truck, $30,000 and I can get it started. So it's a lot easier, a lot more food trucks out there than there are plane companies, for example. Yeah. So my point is that in this case, the barrier to entry is the dedication that it takes to actually focus on mastering execution. I find some of the magic sauce that you're talking about, the equivalent of trying to find a trick play. I'm going to trick play my way through the entire game. You can't do that through the entire game. You have to, at the end of the day, block on the line of scrimmage. You can have some great quarterback, great receiver, they're neutralized if you cannot block on the line of scrimmage. The thing is that is a barrier to entry. That really is, because it sucks to sit there and focus on mundane details that it takes and little tiny adjustments that it takes to be able to actually master execution. Most people aren't willing to do that. And that's why it's a barrier to entry, the same way that trying to my jet company is a barrier to entry. Where what most people are trying to do is find a shortcut with the magic product or the magic whatever you're talking about, the sauce and whatever. Yeah, that's a shortcut. Yeah, a shortcut might work for a brief bit, but in the long run is not going to work. Well, and so you've got to master execution, because you know how it is, man. As the competition gets more intense, as you get into the playoffs, what you did that you got away with in the regular season against an inferior team no longer works.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, Raffi and I are avid sports collegiate football fans, and we do use analogy of sports, and how Raffi just described it, that yes, these trick plays, these magic beans that are going to make that difference, they might give you a hit and a win, but the barrier to entry, Raffi, as you described it, and in my years of coaching, is always self. It is dealing with self. It is dealing with our, whether it's incompetencies to level up. It is dealing with our confidence to get over our own self-doubts, the areas where we self-sabotage, or our lack of discipline in areas. ENFPs like this that love to teach as many possible classes as they can, because out in the world, I was trying to figure out who I was, but luckily it became a container that I'm able to hold and have conversations with many different individuals. All of that you just pull together, it really, like, if you're the author right now looking for that expertise, take what Raffi just said and listen for, what do I have to master this year in 2024 that I haven't mastered that will give me that next level of success? And it's not going to be in the app. It's not going to be in the ManyChat. It's not going to be out there. It's always in here, first and foremost. And then the out there something elevates what you've discovered here and puts it on blast. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If there was some sort of magic out there, then everyone would do it and it would be popular and everyone would hit it. It's not. There's barriers to entry that we're talking about, and there ain't no magic. And what looks like magic, let me tell you, I deal with that from the outside. Just to add to what you're saying, people see me on TV, right? And they think, what's the magic of what he's doing? Actually, it's a process. It's a process. It's not a magic. It's literally a process. And process in business, you have inputs, you have a process, and you have outputs. And you're seeing the outputs, which is the TV, in that case, the TV stuff, right?
Right.
Well, what you didn't see is the inputs and the process. You didn't see that. So when you see the output, you're like, oh my God, this is magic. And here's what you didn't see. All the times I get rejected, all the times I get ignored, all the stuff I had to do to learn how to get better on how to get on TV, all the stuff I had to do well on TV so I get invited back. All the times that I do well on TV, but then don't get invited back and have to figure out why. You don't see any of that. All the investment of time, money that I do, everything, and the sacrifices I make for that. And that's just one aspect, right? And I mean, the TV is like my marketing aspect of my larger kind of venture. So my point is, you're just seeing the outputs and you think there's magic fairy dust. And so someone might go out and say, oh yeah, if you do this, then the magic hits. Put out a book on contested historic sites right when the historic site controversy is happening, and you're going to be on TV 100 times. No, that's not what's going to happen. You got to go make it happen. You got to do the inputs and go through the process so the output happens. Otherwise, those dots don't connect. The dots of the book I had and the dots of the outputs of the TV, they don't connect. The book was just an input. And then there was other inputs, and then there was a process, and then the output came. If you don't do all that stuff in between, you ain't gonna just have a book lead to 150 TV appearances and counting. You follow what I'm saying?
Raffi, you're so good, man. I love when you get fired up, and I still know how to flick that switch, Raffi. I'm proud of myself. All right. Well,
maybe started on genetics.
Hey, really good. We could talk genetics. You did get an A.
You taught my genetics. Yeah, you taught my genetics class.
I want to be able to have people know. You talked about media. So let's do this for a second. Let's give people, let's throw them a bone. They're not in a major metropolitan city, so they have access to maybe some outlier.
Even better.
Right? So what should they do? What are a couple steps?
Well, there's a lot of detail to this, but when you're going to go to a local station, you should be pitching the news desk, is what I would say. You should be pitching the news desk. And when you pitch the news desk, you got to be able to answer the question of why here, why now, why me? You've got to answer those questions. And if you have a topic, I'm just going to make something up. Let's pretend that you live in California, but you have a topic that really makes sense in I don't know, Philadelphia, because you're talking about the signing of the Declaration of Independence. All right.
All right. I like it.
Probably makes more sense to pitch it in Philadelphia than LA. Unless maybe it's July 4th, then it kind of makes sense everywhere because it's an American holiday. It just depends on sort of the situation. But what I'm saying is your local market is not necessarily the right answer. You got to be paying attention. Now, if you have nearby surrounding markets that are not major metros, even better. I would say that's even better to get started like that, so you don't immediately go into the big bright lights. Because going to a TV studio, if you haven't done it before, can be intimidating, right?
Yeah.
And
Preseason games.
yeah,
Play a pickup game before you go for a championship
yeah.
or the biggest.
And even the smaller markets is you're going to go into a TV studio, you're going to be like, oh my God, like I'm in a TV studio. But if you go to an even bigger market, you might get even more starstruck. So it's nice to start smaller. But I think that but what you should do is A, answer those 3 questions. B, get in touch with the news desk. I just do it by email. And in my seminar, I kind of shared all the templates and everything for that. And then number 3, when you show up, you got to think of it as an audition, because one of the biggest tricks to making sure that you have regular TV appearances is to be able to return to the same stations that you've already been on, so you don't have to constantly get into a new station, because it's a lot of work to get into a new station.
Right.
The way you're going to return is you're going to have to do a good job on when you show up, and there's elements to doing a good job. The biggest one of which is making sure that you are not just delivering content, but you have a TV personality. That's important, to deliver personality. The who matters a lot, right? And then finally, when you're done, you have to then use that TV appearance as an asset. It's not about who's watching live. There will be people watching live, no question. And they may be watching on television, streaming online, or on their phone, but they are watching these stations. But what happens is, but I don't care. You could put me on at 3 a.m. I haven't had that happen yet, but you can put me on 3 a.m. when fewer people are watching. I don't care. What I care about is having the video asset that I can then use for marketing purposes, such as showing that I'm an expert, because I know you're talking about experts. Well, if I'm on TV over and over and over about something, that helps show that I'm an expert at something, because I'm out there as the public voice for this, hence the personality celebrity historian, right? Which is itself born, it's a name that is very much TV personality, right? It's the word celebrity historian, right? So that right there, or branding consistency, or the pink bow tie, for example. And that developed time. I mean, maybe my first 25, I didn't figure it out yet, but then eventually I did, so you got it. This is where the experience, we're talking about practice, and then look and adjust. This is a great example, right? I was practicing, I was doing it over and over, and I watched and adjusted. That's how the pink bow tie came up. So my point is that, my tips are that you have to approach the news desk with these questions answered, and then show up and do a good job, and then use the asset that you have in your business, in your marketing material, in your website, in your brochures, and so on and so forth. I have ways that I use it in my presentations. When I'm doing public presentations, I have all kinds of ways that I use it, all of which, by the way, I cover in the TV seminar in greater detail. But that's the sort of overall architecture of doing this. And there's 4 stations in every market. There's ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC. Those stations you can hit in every market. They're going to either be owned and operated by the network, or more likely, most of them are affiliates. So it might be, like KOAT, it might be your call letters, but that's an ABC affiliate. So you just find the affiliates in those markets and get in touch with their news desks.
Raffi, that was a mini masterclass right there. And that's exactly why I call this a masterclass and a workshop, because we want people to do the work. If they've got a passion, they've got purpose, there's a difference they want to make, you're going to have to do the work. And, it's exactly why I started the Author Launchpad. I wanted people to be empowered, because a book in and of itself doesn't do anything. It doesn't magically open and start talking and say, hey, do this exercise. You got to bring it to life. And Raffi, you illustrate that so well. Talk to us about how now all this is coming together. You took this amazing photo in Times Square. You got the big marquee of Times Square behind you. What's this new program that you're delivering?
Yeah, and before I just want to say this about the book, because you brought up the book. Before I answer that, here's another tip. You don't go on TV saying, I want to talk about my book. If that's what you're going to do, then you should buy advertising.
Very
Okay.
good.
Because you're just promoting your product. You
Yeah.
go on TV as an expert. The book is your resume that helps you be an expert, but not the objective of what you're talking about.
Right.
You have to deliver value to the television station, right? So,
Yes.
and the value to the television station is, providing content that is going to help them, of course, please their viewers, right?
Yeah.
And so think about it from outside your perspective. You care about your book, but they like the audience doesn't. So you just have to live with that. So and do you want to sit there and watch TV or YouTube or whatever video you watch and watch nothing but, a series of people parading through promoting their book? No, you don't.
No.
So then make it so that the book is the resume and allows you therefore to talk about X, Y, Z. You follow what I'm saying?
Right.
That's the thing with the book, is use it as a prop, not go on and do a commercial. Otherwise you can get paid programming, and that's a different thing than what we're talking about. Now, as far as how I use it, now you take all those pieces of TV and now you're the expert on a subject. In my case, I use it to the history thing, and I created 3 different programs because of this whole thing. So I have a background in history, obviously, but also in marketing, economics, financial planning, fundraising, just kind of all that numbers associated stuff.
Right.
I used to do fundraising also. I
In New Mexico.
Fundraising thing,
right?
in New Mexico. Yep, as part of the fundraising campaign. And so my point is that I combine all of these to 3 programs I do a year that are all connected to things I'm known for. One is in January that just passed. That's the one you're referring to, which is I call it Business is Personal Workshop, and that's part of the larger project called Orchestrate Business, in which I talk about how for small business people like us, your business and personal is interconnected. And you got to think of all the different pieces and professionals in your life as members in an orchestra. And there's nobody that is actually conducting and coordinating all these people pieces to orchestrate them. And so I think that for small business people, the personal goals and financial goals and life goals are directly connected to the business goals and the business performance, which business performance is based on things like marketing, profitability, etc. So I combine all of those into that Business is Personal Workshop, which is what you're referring to. Now, the next one is event number 2, which is in late April, which is the second thing I'm known for, which is obviously just getting on TV. And that's TV, that's the TV seminar I do, in which I show how to get on TV, how to do well on TV, and then how to use the TV asset in your business. These kind of things that we just talked about. That's tvseminar.tv. That's it doesn't matter what I was going on TV talking about, right? It's just a process of getting on TV. I could have been going on TV talking about, I don't know, paintings over my shoulder, but the process is the same. You can go on talking about medical expertise. The process is the same. So the process is what we're packaging there in the TV seminar. And then of course, the third thing I'm known for is history, celebrity historian. So in the fall,
on that one,
I
added the national celebrity historian to all of my posts. I wanted to make sure you're the national celebrity historian.
I've been on all over. Yep. From California to the East Coast, I've been on all over the place. And
sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, it's okay. No, it's fine. But so for that, I'm doing a history tour in the fall.
Are you really?
I'm calling it Beyond the Postcard. I don't have that up yet on the website. I'm still working on some details on it. But in the September, it's going to be including Gettysburg, where I used to work, including Fort McHenry, where the Star Spangled Banner was created, including Antietam, the bloodiest day in American history, and where the Emancipation Proclamation was, because of which the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. So we're doing all kinds of cool stuff, and you get to go around with me as well as go behind the scenes. That's why I call it Beyond the Postcard. I have special access. And so my point though, from a business standpoint, Chris, is like, I took all these different things that I have backgrounds in and packaged them into these 3 simple events: the Business is Personal Workshop, the TV seminar, and the history tour. These are the 3 things, right? How did I build the celebrity historian? Using the business skills. Well, there you go. Business is Personal Workshop. Then how do they help me achieve my own personal goals? That goes into the Business is Personal Workshop, the financial background, the marketing background, etc. How did I get on TV? That gets into the TV seminar stuff. And then, of course, the actual content I got on TV with, history, that's what made me famous. So you just take those and make them into three simple things. From there are spin-off stuff. Sometimes I do speaking gigs, like live speaking gigs. Sometimes I do one-on-one work if the situation's right. I do an employee program, again, if the situation's right. But those are all spin-offs. Those are all individual engagements that are beyond the product that I put out. The product that I put out is those three events. To your point. And then the other stuff is just more as it happens, as the circumstances present themselves from your core products. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That is so great. And that's exactly, as you spoke to it, it's exactly what I ask authors to do, is to start to think about the productization and the monetization of their expertise beyond the book, not just speaking, because so many of them go, how do I speak? How do I go stand on the red dot? And you illustrated it beautifully. Like, there's such a big world beyond just that little red dot that everybody wants to be part of the, cool. It's a celebrity position to stand on the red dot and be a TED speaker. But there's so many other places that want to hear you where you can make a difference. Raffi, you illustrated that so wonderfully. Look, man, I had the pleasure of standing for 2 years in front of you and delivering my best. If you ever need someone to stand on a stage and introduce you somewhere, I would humbly do that for you. And I promise to tone it down so that the more handsome guy, that's more eloquent, could come out and deliver what he's great at. I would love to do that for you. And it's 1 o'clock. We've hit the top of the hour. So for people watching, I'm just going to acknowledge that. I just want to ask one last thing, Raffi.
Yeah.
You're 80 years old. You're looking back at everything you got to do. What was some of the impacts that you wanted to be known for?
Well, let me take that question and say there's three things I want out of life. Okay. That guide all my principles, or that are the principles that guide everything that I do professionally, personally. And I think that helps answer this. One is time and geographic flexibility. Okay. I wanted to be where I want to be, when I want to be, on my terms. I didn't want to be stuck in the same office, the same place all the time. That was really important. Part of the reason I enjoy traveling for TV. Number two is writing big checks for charity. That's one of my objectives. I don't have a desire to live particularly lavishly in a material sense. I do have a desire to dedicate that, to direct that money towards having charitable impact. Remember, one of my master's degrees is nonprofit development, so I care about this stuff. And I'm a very active Rotary Club member as well, doing all kinds of service work. And number three, being known as an original. That was important to me, because I'm someone that, obviously I have an analytical side, as you can see, but I also have a very creative side, You do. And that creativity to me is exciting. And I think that finding a new way to pave the way for something is really valuable. Again, inspired by history. You look at historical figures. Actually, speaking of the scientific method and some of the foundations of modern science, whether you look at Newton or Bacon, they were also people that were studied philosophy, which is how they were so good at asking questions, right? Yeah. No inquiry, right? And it was scientific method is a form of inquiry, right? Absolutely. And theology and all these topics that we would consider unrelated. But actually, the creativity happens when you can take disparate dots and find a way to connect them. People often say, well, why am I learning this? It's not relevant. Well, let me tell you this. When you go to the gym and you do a funky exercise that you will never be doing that motion in real life, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Because those muscles, you're thinking that in a different situation, they're going to come in handy, right? Yes. Even though that's directly what you do in real life. You're not sitting there in real life pulling a rope over your head. So why are you doing that? The same way it works for the brain. You study the things without worrying about the shortcutting to the outcome again. Just go through the process, just like at the gym. And the outcomes will happen over time. And my point is that you set yourself up for success in that situation. So creativity happens with disparate dots being able to connect suddenly in a moment because you know you have enough dots in there they start to connect. So being known as original to me is really
Mm,
important. And so those are the three things. So my impact, therefore, I would measure in those ways. You know, was I able to be where I want to be when I want to be? Was I able to give a lot of time and money to charity? It's part of the reason I want the time flexibility. And then
yes.
and service work, because otherwise I don't really see a purpose of why I'm here in the world. Like, what am I going to do? Just take up resources and enjoy myself and leave? Well, then that's a very fleeting dead end thing. I think you need to leave some kind of mark. And then the third thing is being known as original, I think is in part because I think that helps inspire people. If you can make a contribution, if you can show a way, then I think that that really helps leave a mark in a different way than charity, right? And being that original is very valuable to me. The same way that creating 4 questions to have to approach contested sites is, or if someone who creates a new formula in economics or mathematics or a new scientific method, I think is so cool because you left a mark. So those are the ways that I would evaluate across those principles in the impact that I had at that age. Now I'll add one last thing on that. When you're old, I often hear older people, since I was a young person, say, I wish I had the courage to be more honest and forthright in certain situations, to say what I actually think. That's why sometimes we kind of chuckle when an old person just says what's on their mind and we're like, they have no filter. Because at that point, they've stopped caring about what you think.
Right.
I learned from that at a young age. And I was like, well, why do I have to need to wait till I'm 80 years old? Why don't I do that now? I don't want to
Yeah.
be 80 and look back and regret because I worried about what people think, that I didn't try to go for these 3 things that I just described. So kind of go back where we started. When you're on stage and you're nervous, think like that 80-year-old who's like, I don't really care what anyone thinks anymore. Well, start it now. Don't start it then. A, you may not get there, but B, even if you are there, why are you going to regret that you didn't do it earlier? Just start doing it. I'm telling
Yes.
you, it's liberating because you stop caring what the reception is and you start doing what the mission and your purpose is. And the right people will
Mm,
come and the wrong people will melt away. And I love that. Please melt away. I'm not worried. It's a mindset of scarcity to be worried about the people you're losing,
wow.
right? Because you're like, oh my God, they cannot be replenished. Yes, they can be. Now, you losing them does not mean offending them. It does not mean punching them intellectually. It just means if they don't accept it, they're just not going to keep hanging on. That's okay,
Right.
right? So you got to be okay. Abundance thinks, oh my God, there's so much out there, I can't get to it. Fine, I don't have time to spend on that. So think like that perspective of not having the regret. Not having regrets doesn't mean being reckless. It
Right.
means stop worrying about the acceptance from the people that may or may not matter. Just do you and have that no filter like that person that we're talking about, like the 80-year-old, and have the courage to do that. And you get the courage by doing the confidence stuff that we talked about, maintaining the perspective that we talked about, and being focused only on your goals, which I described my goals,
Yes.
and going for those.
Wow. Reverend Raffi, bringing it from New Mexico today. You're in New Mexico, St.
No,
Louis?
I'm in St. Louis. I'm in St.
You're in
Louis.
St. Louis. That's right.
Yeah.
From St. Louis. I just want to highlight, and I want to make sure that everybody heard, Raffi is describing boldness, not brashness. Right? It's the boldness about who you are, not the brashness that he's. So I just want to make that clear. When people say, oh, tell your truth, be yourself. We're not saying to step on other people. We're saying be bold, be a listener, and share. Don't be brash. So I want to make sure that part, that I wasn't condoning bulldozing people. Thank you for that, Raffi. And I really heard live a life by design, have a model, be a great philanthropist, absolutely have meaning in life, and be known as an original, a pioneer, a contributor, have a message that you take out to the world. And, for me, I say it's what are you going to package? What are you going to market? And what are you going to monetize? And I hear for you, it's what's my model? What's the meaning? And what's the message? And Raffi, I didn't know it'd be this good, but I knew it deep down inside it would be. You can't know somebody for 23 years and, and not. So I really thank you, Raffi, for taking the time, because I knew you flew in from somewhere yesterday. Where were you yesterday?
I was in New Mexico. Funny enough, yeah. I still visit there often. I used to live in New Mexico. Yeah, I still visit there often, do TV, do
Yeah,
some other stuff. Yeah, but I'm back home in St. Louis now.
really great. Say hello to your wife. Say hello to the fam. Say hello to mom, because I see she shows up still at times.
Yeah.
I still have her number. If I got to report you on something, I'll call her. And really, Raffi, you've turned into an amazing benchmark of what it is to just trust the journey, to keep taking it, putting it together, and leaning into it, and having that boldness. And I really acknowledge you, Raffi, for everything you've done. I'm excited. If there's anything I could do to serve you or your clients or the ones that show up, they're all inspired about what you do, but maybe they don't have the process and the systems. You know a guy that could help them out with that part. And like I said, I'm happy to be your warm-up guy anytime that you're going to deliver a keynote.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been day 3. Own your expertise. You just got it all from Raffi Andonian. What is it going to take for you to market and monetize that expertise, to live your message, to have meaning in 2024? And I hope, I know we did. It's not I hope. I know we delivered value today. And if you need anything, Raffi, how can they find you? So please, one more time, how can people find you if they're like, I want to go work with Raffi? How do they find you, please?
You can go, well, right now for the TV one, you can go to tvseminar.tv, or if you want to get in touch with me in general, there's celebrityhistorian.com. There's a bunch of stuff on there that you could check out as well. And there's a way to get in touch with me there also.
Beautiful. And for me, send us a DM, send me a message. I'll connect you to Raffi. I might have a picture from his yearbook if you want to see that as well.
Yes. That's great.
And with that being said, we thank you so much. I'm going to end the stream now. We'll see you later. Thanks so much for joining today. All right.